6 weeks. No names, no photos, just talking. And then the door opened, and it was the man who spoke at my husband's funeral.
This is Michael Tells, and this is Recorded for Me. Nora sent me this one, and she told me she deleted it 4 times before she got through it. You'll understand why in about 10 seconds. A widow, an app with no names and no faces, and 6 weeks of talking to a stranger who turned out to be anything but. Let's listen to it together.
Hi, Michael. Okay, I've started this recording 4 times now. 4. I keep getting about 30 seconds in and deleting it because every time I hear myself say the first sentence out loud, it sounds insane. So I'm just going to keep going this time, no matter how it comes out. Deal? My name's Nora. I'm 41. And about 3 years ago, I tried one of those anonymous dating apps. No names, no photos, nothing. Just out of curiosity. And the man I matched with turned out to be my late husband's best friend. Yeah, that's the sentence. That's the one I keep deleting. Okay, let me start at the beginning because none of it makes sense without the beginning. His name was Nathan, my husband. I met him when I was 23 at the worst possible party. One of those things where you only went because your roommate begged you. I was standing by the food table eating grapes, planning my exit. And this guy comes up and asks me, completely seriously, whether I thought the host had bought the cheap grapes on purpose or by accident. That was it. That was his opening line, about grapes. We talked for 4 hours in that kitchen. 4 hours. People were leaving around us and we didn't notice. We got married when I was 25. Small wedding, my parents' backyard. My aunt made the cake and it slid a little in the heat. I still have a photo of that sliding cake somewhere. 11 years, Michael. 11 years altogether. Now, there's a piece I have to tell you, and I want to tell it properly because it matters for everything after. We couldn't have children. It wasn't me. That's what people always assume. And I spent a lot of years watching people assume it. It was Nathan. We found out when I was 28. 3 years of trying. Then tests, then a doctor's office with terrible carpet, where a man explained to us very gently that it wasn't going to happen for us that way. I want to be honest. The first year after that was the hardest year of our marriage. Not because of anger, because of guilt. He carried it like it was a moral failing, like he'd defrauded me somehow. He actually said to me once, "You should have married somebody who works." And I got so angry at him for that, angriest I'd ever been. I told him if he ever said anything like that again, I'd leave, and it wouldn't be because of the children. But here's the thing that happened, and I didn't understand it until much later. That year almost broke us. And then it made us into something most people don't get to have. Because once you've sat across from each other in the worst version of your life, and neither one of you got up and left, everything after that is easier. Everything. We stopped having stupid fights. Truly, little things stopped mattering. We had this thing where if one of us was spiraling, the other one would just say, "Carpet," like that carpet in the doctor's office, and it meant, hey, we survived that. This is nothing. 11 years, and I never once got tired of him. Not once. I know how that sounds, but it's true, and we decided to adopt. Took us about 2 more years to get there emotionally, and then we started the process. Paperwork, classes, home visits. It's long. It's a lot. We were about 1.5 years in. We had a room. We'd painted it this pale green because we didn't know who was coming. Nathan died on a Tuesday in April. He was 36, a blood clot from his leg to his lung. He'd had knee surgery 6 weeks before. Routine. He was fine. He was back at work. And then he stood up from his desk on a Tuesday afternoon, and by the time I got to the hospital, there was nothing anyone could do. No warning. No sick. No goodbye. He texted me that morning about picking up dog food. I'm not going to spend a long time on the 2 years after that, Michael, because honestly, I don't remember a lot of it. And what I do remember, I don't especially want to hand to anybody. But I'll tell you the shape of it. The first 6 months, people were wonderful. Casseroles, phone calls, the whole thing. And then, and this isn't a complaint, it's just true, everybody goes back to their lives. That's normal. That's how it should be. But there's a point, somewhere around month 8, where the calls stop, and you're in a quiet house, and the world has moved on, and you have not. My friend Beth was the one who stayed. She'd call every Sunday, wouldn't take no, and half the time we didn't even talk. She'd just put me on speaker while she did her dishes. I'll never be able to repay that. And I started seeing a therapist about a year in, Dr. Reyes. I'd been very against it. I'm from people who don't do that. And I was wrong, and I'll say that plainly for anybody listening who's on the fence. She didn't fix anything. She just gave me somewhere to put it down for 50 minutes a week. I remember telling her that I felt like I'd been widowed twice. Once from him, and once from the whole life we'd been about to have. That green room. We never repainted it. It just sat there. Okay, so 4 years go by. I'm 38. I'm functioning. I'm working. I'm seeing friends. I'm fine. Genuinely fine, most days. And Beth starts on me about dating. And I said absolutely not. Repeatedly. For about a year. The problem wasn't that I couldn't imagine loving someone. It was that I couldn't imagine the explaining. Sitting across from a stranger and having to hand over the worst thing that ever happened to me on a first date and watch their face do that thing. The pity face. Or worse, watching them decide I was a project. I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. And then one night, Beth sends me a link to this app. And the whole idea of it was no photos, no names, no age even. You answered a bunch of questions about what you actually cared about, and it matched you on that, and you talked. That's it. You could stay anonymous as long as you wanted. And I remember thinking, well, that's the only version of this I could possibly survive. So I made an account, out of curiosity. That's genuinely all it was. I told myself I'd look at it for a week and delete it, and within 2 days, it matched me with someone. And Michael, I've thought about this 100 times since. The reason it matched us so hard right off was that we had almost everything in common. The same music, the same handful of books, the same weird opinion about a specific football team, even the same little town 2 hours north that we both said was our favorite place. I didn't understand until much later that all of that was Nathan. All of it. Those were Nathan's books, Nathan's team, Nathan's town. Nathan gave those things to both of us. He just did it 20 years apart. The app looked at 2 people and said, "You two are the same." And it was right. We were the same because we'd both been shaped by the same man. We talked for 6 weeks, and it was the best 6 weeks I'd had since the Tuesday in April, and I'm not exaggerating. Because with no face and no name, I could say anything. And so could he. I told him things I hadn't told Dr. Reyes. I told him about the green room. I told him I still had a voicemail I'd never delete. He told me he'd been divorced for a long time and hadn't really tried since. He told me he'd lost somebody a few years back, his best friend, and that it had knocked something loose in him that never went back. I didn't ask. He didn't ask. That was the whole point of the thing. Then he asked to meet, and I said no. I said no twice, actually. And then I stopped answering for 4 days, which was not my finest hour. I was terrified because 6 weeks in, I already cared about this person. And meeting meant it becoming real. And real meant it could be taken. And I knew exactly what that felt like now. But he was patient. He didn't push. He just said, whenever, if ever. And on the 5th day, I wrote back and said, Thursday. Okay, the restaurant. It's a small place, maybe 12 tables, on a corner. I got there early because I get everywhere early when I'm nervous. I sat facing the door. I'd changed my clothes 3 times, and the door opens, and it's Owen. And Michael, I want to describe what actually happened in my body, because it wasn't romantic. It was like being dropped. My ears went hot. My hands went cold. I stood halfway up and then sat back down, which I'm sure looked insane, because I knew him. Of course I knew him. Owen was Nathan's best friend since they were 19 years old. He was at our wedding. He was at our kitchen table probably 200 times. He's the one who spoke at Nathan's service. He stood up and talked about him when I couldn't get words out at all. I don't remember much from that day, but I remember his voice doing it, and he'd been across from me for 6 weeks, and neither of us had any idea. He froze in the doorway. I watched him understand it about a second after I did, and I watched him almost turn around. He actually took a half step back. I saw it. And then he came over, and he sat down. And we sat there in complete silence for, I don't know, it felt like 10 minutes, probably 20 seconds. And I was so ashamed, Michael. That's the honest word, not embarrassed. Ashamed, like I'd been caught doing something, and I could see it on him too. He couldn't look at me. And then he said, I'm not going to pretend this isn't what it is. And I said something like, we should go, or this was a mistake. I don't remember exactly. And he said, probably, but I've been talking to you for 6 weeks, and I don't want to stop. That was him taking it. That moment, I couldn't have. I was completely underwater. He picked it up and carried it. And that's actually who he is, I've learned. He does that. So we stayed. We ordered food we didn't eat, and we talked for a very long time about the only thing there was to talk about, which was Nathan.
And that was the strangest, best conversation of my life. Because for 4 years, I'd been the only person in every room who was still carrying him full time. Everyone else had put him down, kindly, normally, the way people do. And here was somebody who was carrying exactly the same weight, the same size, still. We laughed that night about him, actual laughing in a restaurant about a dead man. I hadn't done that with anybody. Now, I want to be very clear about what happened next, because I think people hear this story and imagine something fast, and it was the opposite of fast. It was a year, Michael. A year before anything. We were friends. Deliberately, carefully friends. Coffee, long walks. He'd fix things at my house because he can't sit still. And underneath all of it, there was this thing neither of us would say out loud, and this enormous guilt attached to it. We both had our own version. Mine was, who does that? Who buries her husband and ends up with his best friend? What does that make me? I had a whole voice in my head, and it sounded a lot like certain people I know. And his was worse, honestly. His was, that's Nathan's wife. Those were his words. He said it to me once, about 8 months in, and he was almost angry when he said it. That's Nathan's wife. And I said, I'm not anybody's wife anymore, Owen. That's the whole problem. You want to know what actually broke it open? There was a night, this was maybe 10 months in, and we were on my porch, and he told me something I didn't know. He said that about a year after Nathan died, he'd driven to my house 3 separate times and sat outside and not come in because he didn't know what he'd be walking in there as. Friend of the family or something he wasn't allowed to be. So he just drove home. 3 times. And I never knew. And I sat there thinking, 4 years. We spent 4 years alone, 11 minutes apart, both of us drowning in exactly the same thing. And it took a computer that didn't know either of our names to put us in the same room. He told me he loved me about a year after that dinner. On the phone, not even in person, which is very him. Just said it and then said, okay, bye, like a coward. I called him right back. And he never proposed. Not then. He asked me if I wanted to live together. That's it. That's how he did it. No ring, no speech. He said, I don't want to keep driving home. I said yes so fast. And then, okay, this is the part I still can't talk about without needing a minute. About 7 months after I moved in, I got pregnant. I was 40 years old, and I had spent 12 years of my life absolutely certain that I would never be pregnant. Not probably not. Certain. I'd grieved it. I'd done the whole process of letting it go,
with the classes and the paperwork and the green room, and I had made my peace with a different kind of life. I took the test at 6 in the morning, and I sat on the bathroom floor for probably half an hour. And I want to say this carefully because it's complicated and I don't want it to sound like something it isn't. I wasn't just happy. I cried for about 3 days, and some of those tears were joy and some of them were for Nathan. Because it was never his fault, and he carried it like it was, and he never got to have this. And that isn't fair, and I don't have a nice way to wrap that up. I told Owen that. All of it. The messy version. And he didn't get hurt or weird about it. He just said, I know. I've been thinking about him too. That's why it works. That's exactly why it works. Our daughter's name is May. She's 8 months old. She has Owen's ridiculous ears and she does not sleep. And we got married 3 months after she was born. Not before, after. That order upset a couple of people in my family, and I found that I did not care even a little. We did it in a friend's backyard with 11 people. My mother, Beth, a few of Owen's people. I wore a dress I bought online. It rained a bit and nobody minded. And Owen said something in his vows that I'll keep for the rest of my life. He said, I'm not replacing anybody. There's just more room than we thought. So, that's the story. I'm sorry it went so long. I told you I'd ramble. I think the reason I finally sent this is I know what people think when they hear it. I've heard the whispers. I've had one family member stop speaking to me. I know some people hear she married his best friend and their mouth goes thin. And what I'd want to say to that, if I could say one thing, is grief isn't a rule book. There's no clean, respectable order to it. Nobody hands you a schedule. 2 people who loved the same man were alone for 4 years, 11 minutes apart, and it took an app with no names and no faces to get us in the same room. If that's not permission, I don't know what is. And I don't think Nathan would have been angry. I've thought about that more than anything else. I think he'd have been relieved. I think he'd have said, well, obviously. And then he'd have taken credit for the whole thing, because that would be extremely like him. Thanks for listening, Michael. This was much harder to say than I expected, and much easier than I expected, both at once. I don't know how that works. Okay, May's up. I have to go. Take care.
So that was Nora. And I've been sitting here thinking about one detail she almost threw away. The app matched them because they had everything in common. Same books, same music, same little town 2 hours north. And she said it took her a long time to realize that all of it came from Nathan. He gave those things to both of them, 20 years apart. So a computer that didn't know their names looked at 2 people and said, "You two are the same." And it was right. They were the same because the same man made them that way. I don't know what to call that. I'm not sure it needs a name. And the other thing I can't put down. 3 times he drove to her house and sat outside and didn't go in. 4 years. 11 minutes apart. Both of them drowning in exactly the same thing, alone, because neither one knew what they'd be allowed to be. She said grief doesn't come with a rule book. Nobody hands you a schedule. And I think she's right. People had opinions about her. Some of them still do. But not one of those people sat in that quiet house for 4 years. I'm not replacing anybody. There's just more room than we thought. That's what he said at the wedding. I'd take that over 100 fancier lines. This has been Michael Tells. Take care of each other. I'll see you next time.